Hey, welcome into another episode of the Big Time Sports Podcast Show. Take two. It's Mitch Spinell alongside Mitchell Valley here to give you the latest of what's going on in the sporting world. Mitch, we just had to get that first one stopped after missed connections, but we're back.
We are back. And just for the people out there that were wondering, because you asked it in the first take, the fantasy football teams are doing fine. 2-0 in one league that the Yahoo website projected me to go 1-13. So already a better season than I could have imagined that league. We're going for 3-0 this week, and every other league I'm in, we already have a win. So it's a good start to the fantasy season for me over here this year.
Absolutely. I'm amazed that they have websites now that can predict your fantasy status based on your team, but that's because I don't play fantasy. But we are playing a new episode this week where we do talk about some of the latest matchups in high school sports, starting off with week 6 of the high school football season. Because one in mind that I'm very interested in seeing tonight is the matchup between Jackson and Lake, a game that could be an early battle for a shot at the Federal League Championship. Jackson and Lake both at 4-1. The Polar Bears just beat Perry. The Blue Streaks just beat Louisville. And right now, Jackson is coming in having not a breakout game from last week, but a solidifying game from quarterback, a sophomore, Lucas Eckerman, who has proven himself to be one of the top slingers in Starr County.
Yeah, he certainly has, Mitch. I mean, my goodness, 400 yards of total offense from the sophomore quarterback just this past week in that win over Perry. It's a big test now for Lucas Eckerman and the Polar Bears this evening at Lake. Lake, one of the tougher places to play in the Federal League, and Lake also hungry. They got upset a couple of weeks ago by Glen Oak in Federal League play. You mentioned it's only week 6, but this could kind of be for positioning to try to win the Federal League because both teams still match up with McKinley, who is undefeated in Federal League play right now. Lake will be at McKinley next week, and then McKinley the following week, week 8 at Jackson. Neither team can get caught looking ahead because this one is the biggest game thus far in the season for both sides. But Jackson, after last year, Lake coming to Robert Fife Stadium and really giving Jackson the business. We know how talented that Lake squad was, obviously losing Will Butler at quarterback, losing a couple other key pieces. Jackson losing their majority of their offensive line from last year and leading rusher Jason Davide. A lot of the same pieces there. Now, Eckerman did not play against Lake last year as a freshman. Eckerman didn't really come into the later part of the season last year, about the final 3 weeks before that playoff matchup. So this is something Lake has not seen yet besides on film. What does that mean? Can Eckerman continue to spread the ball around? This sophomore quarterback is playing like anything other than a sophomore, Mitch. He is slinging the ball to any of his wide receivers. He has a couple seniors in Fuel Line, Kyle Benson, Kyle Andrews. Then you have a junior, Noah Kalanda, who had over 100 yards receiving last week and a couple touchdowns. The weapons are there for Eckerman, and if they're not there on the outside, he is showing you he has the capability to run with his legs and pick up first downs and pick up big yardage, and that is huge for Jackson. Their defense so far this year, Mitch, has been stellar. The most points they've given up were still in a win. That was that 39-38 comeback affair against Mayfield in week 2. For Lake, though, this is a team that has looked very good defensively. They returned a majority of their starters from their defensive side of the football last year. And this is a team now playing at home, call it for what you want, kind of with their backs against the wall, knowing they have one Federal League loss already. This is almost as much of a must-win game for the Blue Streaks as it can get. And you know they're going to be prepared under head coach Dan DeGeorge. You know they're going to come out with something in some form of trick play action or trying to get Jackson out of their element. Could this be a game where Lake tries to control the clock? Could this be a game where Lake tries to match Jackson score for score? Or is this going to be a defensive slugfest between both teams? I don't know, but I'm really excited to, 1, be there tonight, and then 2, be able to recap this game next week because we're already halfway point in the season. And as we continue to go on here, we're going to start talking about who the real possibilities are for the Federal League champion.
Yeah, Lake is one of the top rushing offenses I've seen so far. Nate Bakers ran for a team high 520 yards, 5.2 yards per carry. And Noah Kabaski and Cale Jarvis, the quarterbacks of the team, have combined for 7 rushing touchdowns on the year. Both of them had their first passing touchdowns of the season last week against the Leopards. So it's kind of a tale of two offenses right now that we'll see on Friday night. 2 other teams that will play on Friday night: Canton McKinley against North Canton Hoover. That was an interesting one because I think that McKinley's it's a good chance they're going to win, but it's a case of which team is going to be arriving at Memorial Stadium tonight. Will it be the team that dominated Warren Harding? Will it be the team that dominated Dublin Kaufman and Perry? Or will be the teams that kind of struggled with turnovers against the likes of Avon and Green. Now, granted, McKinley took advantage of the Green Bulldogs losing their quarterback last week, and they were able to rally from that despite having 6 turnovers in that game, 5 in the first half. But it's really an interesting game because I do think that, again, I think McKinley's probably going to be the victors at the end of tonight. But if Hoover gets on the board early and McKinley starts making some careless mistakes, this could be a surprising one that I think could kind of throw a monkey wrench into McKinley's Federal League chances.
Absolutely. Look, Hoover has not had the year that they wanted to have thus far through the first 5 weeks of the season. However, they still are in control of their own destiny, and a win tonight would throw Hoover right back into the mix in Federal League play in terms of trying to go for that Federal League championship. And Mitch, they have Carson Derlin at quarterback, which really, that was a big reason we were so high on Hoover this year. And he's still very, very good. It's what's happened around him on the offensive line, the backfield, the wide receivers. But if McKinley can't get to Derlin and you allow this Division I recruit at quarterback to sit back in that pocket and have time, he is going to pick you apart. He's that talented, that gifted. McKinley is going to have to get pressure on Carson Derlin tonight. They're also going to have to shut down any run game McKinley has. But if Derlin comes out and starts hitting receivers and it opens up the run game, you're right. This could very well throw a monkey wrench into things for McKinley. And how does McKinley bounce back? You want to talk about the tale of two halves. Last week against Green, 5 turnovers in the first half. You go into the locker room down 27-7. Second half, you come back out and you score 21 unanswered, win 28-27. Green losing Samino Manson in that game, which could very well be for the season. But to your point, what Bulldogs team are we going to get in terms of consistency right now? From week 1 to 2 wasn't there, but then from weeks 3 and 4 it was there, and then week 5 it was there for a half. So there's a couple question marks with McKinley. At the same time, though, with Nino Hill in the backfield, he's always a threat to score. With some of the other playmakers they have on the outside, both offensively and defensively, they can hurt you in multiple ways. So this is one that when you look at the record, you'd say, yeah, McKinley probably will win this. But if we come back Monday or Tuesday and record and we're talking about Hoover winning, I'm not going to be shocked whatsoever.
I'm glad you brought up the rushing defense because the Vikings have had their struggles with keeping teams on the ground maintained this year. They gave up 448 yards to Hudson back in week 2. McKinley last week put up 350 rushing yards, and it was not only Nino Hill who had a solid game. He's one of the top backs in the Federal League. We know this, but Stephen Thomas, the junior, is a very different back from Hill. Hill's more of a power runner. Thomas is a little more crafty and shifty, but both of them had 100 rushing yards last week. And if Keaton Road for the struggles, some of the struggles he's had this year, the 5 interceptions last week, he's thrown for over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns this season. He's averaging more than 1 per game. So that's something where I think he can really bring into it. But it's not only having to contain Carson Derlin for McKinley's defense. Zach Brogger, if he breaks away for a big play, that could really throw off McKinley. He had 9 catches for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Could be a very interesting one there. And as we mentioned for Green, they are coming off the loss. They'll play Glen Oak this week, and they'll try to bounce back against them. Massillon's going to take on another out-of-state opponent in Middletown, Delaware. Middletown's 3-0, and they're pretty solid defense from what it seems. They've only allowed 21 points this year through 3 games. They've scored 138 points. This is more so just trying to figure out what an out-of-state opponent will bring. Now, Middletown did play Massillon last season, and they lost to the Tigers 42-24. It's more so a case of if they can contain one of the top quarterbacks in the area, DeJuan Owens. The guy is putting up video game numbers. It's insane. So looking at some of the other matchups in the Stark County area here, are there any of these that kind of stand out to you? Because, I mean, a lot of them right now, beyond the ones we just mentioned, are really good teams playing up against not so great teams this week. It's kind of a iffy week.
I'm intrigued to see what happens between Perry and Louisville. You think about this. Perry's had 2 straight rough weeks in terms of offense and their defense just not being there, giving up 40+ points per game. Last week, Louisville giving up 49 to Lake. These are 2 teams, Mitch, that I feel like are almost caught in the middle right here. of trying to figure out maybe their identity. Obviously for Louisville, you get that little leeway with a first-year head coach and Chris Kappas, but at the same time, these are two teams that play different styles of football. Obviously Perry with the wing T. How is Louisville going to be prepared to stop that? And then where is Perry? How do they rebound after 2 weeks of just their defense not being there? And we know for as good as Perry can run the wing T, when you get down a few scores in that game and that clock keeps ticking and ticking away, you're not going to be able to run the ball that much. So can Perry keep it close? Can they maintain a lead in this game to where they can run their offense the way they want to run it? Or can Louisville really affect this and they get a lead first and build on that lead throughout the game to where they have to make Perry one-dimensional in throwing the football, to which it hasn't looked like Perry's very comfortable with that this year.
I will say if there's any game for Owen Burek, the Louisville quarterback, to go off on, it might be this, because the Perry defense, they've allowed 980 yards of offense in the last 2 weeks, 698 of those yards in passing. So this could be a very a good game for him to try and take advantage of a weaker secondary. But Louisville's got to put on the points. They've averaged only 13.4 points per game this season. A couple of other matchups here I wanted to talk about was one that I wanted to mention, a team that we haven't really talked about this year, an EBC matchup between Marlington and Carrollton. The Dukes have started off 4-1 for the first time since 2018. Their offense, led by quarterback Bryson McCord, has averaged over 33 points per game this season. They've only once failed to score 30 points in a game this season. Now, Carrollton's won 2 out of their last 3 meetings, but Carrollton had a bit of a slide that we kind of saw a couple weeks ago over in Carrollton when they lost to Garaway. They snapped their 3-game losing streak last week. They are coming off a 41-point performance over Garfield in week 5. So they're coming off a good victory, and it will be interesting to see if Marlington can put a stop to that tonight. A bunch of IVC matchups in here as well. I think the big one being Sandy Valley up against Indian Valley. These are 2 very good IVC opponents. And the Cardinals are coming off a big win against IVC North foe Malvern. So it's going to be very interesting to see where the Cardinals kind of find themselves in the race for the IVC South, because it's Indian Valley, Garaway, Ridgewood. They're kind of the big 3 in the IVC South. Sandy Valley, though, has made a couple of runs over the last few years and been able to kind of find themselves in the mix. But this is a big game for Sandy Valley to prove itself among this core of IVC South teams. I mean, the Braves that were coming off, we saw them on the Big Time Sports Show the other day, coming off a big playoff run last year. Had a couple of tough losses this year. They've lost to Dover. They also lost to St. Clairsville. And, Sandy Valley is going to rely heavily on, their passing game. Nick Petro has been very good so far this year. He's also a big running threat alongside Chad Davis. He's actually had more carries than Chad Davis, but he's coming off a big passing game against the Hornets where he was able to put up some big numbers. And then the Indian Valley Braves, we've seen them. Grady Kinsey leads that rushing offense right now. So I'm very curious to see what will happen there. Not a couple other IVC matchups in there as well. We kind of mentioned Malvern against Strasburg. Malvern's 4-1 on the year. Strasburg coming off a loss. East Canton taking on Newcomerstown. Newcomerstown 3-2, which is interesting in the IVC North. They're competing there alongside Malvern, but time will tell what they're going to be able to do against the Hornets. All right. Hey, Stark County, it's your friends from the local Board of Mental Health and Addiction Recovery, and we have a challenge for you. We're asking you to create a new habit and check in on someone every day. Nothing fancy, just a simple text, phone call, or note on social media to ask someone how they're doing. You don't have to be a professional, you just have to ask and then listen. Are you someone who could use a check-in? Text 4HOPE to 741-741 anytime, day or night, or dial 988. Brought to you by Stark County Mental Health and Addiction Recovery.
Wendy's without the Wendy's app is like Nugs without the sauce. Or a Frosty without the fries. Or a hamburger without the fresh beef. No!
Registration required. Fresh beef available in contiguous U.S., Alaska, and Canada.
You deserve the best. And at Ferris Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, Toyota, that's what you get. We consider you, the customer, to be part of our family. Anybody can make promises, but when you visit Ferris, you get the Ferris deal from a Ferris wheel. So if you're looking for a car, truck, or van, think Ferris.
Think Ferris. Where you matter.
You matter. Everyone plays a part. We all have a role. Each of us can make a difference. You do matter, and the best way to have a positive impact is to pay it forward. With each of us helping one another to cope, feel better, and know that we belong. Pass on the positivity today. Tell someone else they matter too. Alt Care.
Alt Care, Alt Care. Where you matter.
You invest a lot in your home and vehicle purchases. Van Nostrand Young and Associates want you to feel secure should anything happen to those investments. We partnered with providers like Grange Insurance and other industry leaders to be sure you're presented with the most complete coverage to fit your needs. Because we're not only here to protect the items you invest in, we're here to protect your future as well.
Call Van Nostrand Young Insurance in North Canton at 330-497-1867.
Happy Sardiversary with Sarda rider Anthony. We're celebrating 25 years with our valued riders.
And I absolutely enjoy riding the buses. I get to know a few of the drivers, very respectful, very professional. Just an all-around about good experience. It helps people get to where they're going, disabled, veterans, or people going to work.
Thanks to all our riders as we celebrate Sarda 25 at Sarda.
Let's move on now to another topic here. We can kind of go. I'll start off with last night's Thursday night game. Kind of just felt like a game. Like it wasn't like a standout game. It wasn't like an exciting one. It was the exact results I think people were expecting going in, which is the Niners would win comfortably against the Giants, and they did. I mean, this is what more can we say about this 49ers team? They're stacked. They're stacked to the core. They are going to be a contender in the NFC West this year. Even with Mitch, like Brock Purdy hasn't looked bad. And last night he was able to put up some decent numbers, 25 of 37, 310 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's more than decent, I should say. It's a solid game. This format that they have, though, where I'm curious as to get your perspective on it. Where do you think Purdy is? How do you think Purdy is being received among like outside sources? Because the team obviously is cool with him. The guys on the team are obviously cool with him because he's still the starting quarterback. He's the QB1 now, we know, for the future. And despite being literally, this is the first Mr. Irrelevant to have any success long term, at least for a year in the NFL. And he seems to keep having his head above water. Like, where do you see this being in the long term? Because if this 49ers team eventually like ever doesn't become any elite anymore, does that translate into Purdy shouldering more of the offense on his shoulders and maybe becoming a quarterback in the same way like Russell Wilson was at the start of his career? Or do you think this is kind of like a early, like a short-term sort of career for Purdy? Again, I'm not trying to say that Purdy's going to flame after a few years for those who are listening or watching, but I'm curious as to kind of gauge where his role in this on this team will be here in the next few years.
It's a great question. It's something I actually had a conversation about last night. He looks good. I still think that he might be affected by the offseason surgery he had on that UCL that he injured against the Eagles in the NFC Championship game last year. And, you know, for all we know, if he plays healthy that game, maybe it's the Niners in the Super Bowl instead of the Eagles. I don't know. What I do know is their defense is legit. There's no question about that. That front four, Mitch, they might have the best front four in football to a point where it makes life miserable for other teams because they don't have to rush extra people. They can take that front four and get pressure on the quarterback almost any time. I mean, my goodness, they go out and get Hargraves in the offseason from the Eagles. He has a sack last night. Nick Bosa, we know just how great he is. We played for that team that you have a shirt on for right now, so we know him really well. But when it comes to Purdy, this is a team that has signed multiple guys or has multiple guys to big-time contracts. As great as the 49ers are, they have a window right now of 3 years because with how Purdy's played, he is not going to be making less than $900,000 once that contract's up, unless he completely flames out, which I don't think he will. I think he's a very good quarterback given where he's at. the system with Kyle Shanahan and the weapons he has. Elijah Mitchell as your running back 2 is a pretty damn good running back 2 option behind Christian McCaffrey. Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Ronnie Bell last night, the rookie scoring his first touchdown, Mitch. He looked very, very comfortable in that offense. George Kittle, top 5 tight end in the NFL, and they have a very big offensive line. This team is built to beat you in multiple ways. But I also wonder when it comes to Purdy, if this team wins a Super Bowl, one time in the next 3 seasons, this year included, what happens to him in terms of that contract? Because he's going to want paid, right? You already talked about it. He's the first Mr. Relevant to even have anything relevant in terms of, a year, which is crazy as it sounds. Yeah, a year isn't that long, but for Mr. Relevant, it's pretty long. We're talking about Mr. Relevance. It's a shock if they make the team sometime for whatever team drafts them. But what happens if they win a Super Bowl? And what type of money does he want? I'm curious as to know how good he really is. Is it the system that he's benefiting from with all these weapons, or is he actually that good of a quarterback? I don't think he's back to form last year where he was when he came in and took the job once Garoppolo went down late in the season. I think he's still knocking off a little bit of rust. He had a couple throws last night, just weren't there that I think last year were. That's to be expected. You're talking about surgery on your throwing elbow. Look what happens to baseball players. It's pretty similar for football players. Okay. That motion over and over and over. I'm really intrigued to see how far he can take them because we haven't had to see him shoulder the load so far, Mitch, because of all the weapons. McCaffrey last night, by the way, looked incredible. He looked like he found more speed somewhere that offensive line can run block and pass block. And sometimes Shanahan just says, you know what? Get the ball in Deebo Samuel's hands. Get the ball in Ayuk's hands. Get the ball in Kittle's hands. Just let our playmakers make plays. So I don't know. It's a really fascinating question. It's something that we won't know probably right away this year. But when you look at the track record Kyle Shanahan has, it almost makes you wonder if he plays to every single quarterback's strengths. I mean, look at Jimmy Garoppolo. When healthy, Mitch, he was a quarterback that everybody thought was a top 10 quarterback at times. And then the injury, we know Garoppolo's issue was the injury bug. We know they were high on Trey Lance, and I give the 49ers a ton of credit for trading him and coming out flat out saying, we messed up. We thought he was the guy. He's not the guy. To me, that says a lot about where that organization is, where that front office is with John Lynch as the general manager. I am just curious. I mean, like you said, 25-37, 300 plus passing yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. I believe maybe with the exception of week 2 this year, Brock Purdy now is thrown for more 2+ touchdowns or more in every single regular season game he started. So that to me tells you he's capable of being the guy. But back to your original point, can he shoulder the load as this continues to go? If guys go down with injury, if guys are getting older and they can't retain some of these players, which is ultimately going to happen with these contracts they have, I don't know. And I think any moves they make at quarterback, whether it's free agency or the draft in terms of younger guys, cheaper guys, would be very telling here in the next, calendar year, 2 seasons.
Yeah, I could see that. It is really one of those situations where the 49, I don't want to say the 49ers got lucky by taking another quarterback so late in the draft, but it really is kind of one of those things where if they didn't have a Brock Purdy safety net to fall back on, that Trey Lance thing would have been so crazy for an organization that otherwise has seemingly had a spotless track record in terms of front office moves under John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan, and the works. But yeah, San Francisco's still solid. New York still got some questions. They got that win against Arizona, but who isn't going to beat Arizona this season? Yeah, it's going to be a very tricky year for the Giants, where now it looks like the Commanders are probably the 3rd best team in the NFC East right now, which is not a slight, but yeah, that's just a tough break for the New York Football Giants. I want to talk about our team too, because the news that we kind of figured was going to happen, it happened. Kareem Hunt was signed to the Cleveland Browns to kind of fill in the void that was left by the Nick Chubb injury. And yeah, we kind of talked about in the last podcast. I did mention a number of other names in there, but it made the most sense to bring in a guy who already knew your system pretty much. And look, this is what I said. No panic. The Browns bring in a guy who has been at a Pro Bowl level before, a guy who hasn't had as many first team reps in the last few years, but is going to get all the first team reps he wants now. And I like what the team is doing. I still like where the offense can produce to where they can, if they can get themselves together a quarterback, obviously they can match up with a number of teams in the NFL. The defense looks like a top 10 defense, maybe more. And you get this matchup against Tennessee this week. I know Tennessee is going to come in with Derrick Henry in the works, but if the defense can keep them in check, I can see the Browns winning this.
I think the Browns have to win this. And
I've been
this
seeing
game
this.
this game is going to be very telling because Tennessee has one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL so far through the first 2 weeks of the season. Deshaun Watson had the excuses in week 1 because of the weather, right? That's what I mean by excuses. And then last week against Pittsburgh, it was bad. It was ugly. At the same time, Tennessee does not have anybody defensively along that front that scares me as much as TJ Watt or Highsmith, or even when Cam Hayward would have been healthy for Pittsburgh. This is a game the Browns should win. I think they will win. I need to see the offense have some swagger. This defense, Mitch, looks legit. But what is different this year? Not only is Jim Schwartz playing to his defensive strength, but these guys are playing loose. Look at the plays they make. They get up, they celebrate, where the offense does look tight. I do think Kareem Hunt does help with that. And this is not a shot at Nick Chubb whatsoever. But Nick Chubb is a very quiet guy, right? He's not a guy that celebrates when he scores a touchdown. He's not a very vocal guy, at least from what we see. We know Kareem Hunt is that kind of energy guy. We know he is vocal. So maybe just getting a guy in there to where Jerome Ford maybe isn't at that level yet because he's still only in the second year, barely played his first year. Maybe Kareem Hunt helps that. Somebody's going to have to step up here. Is it David Njoku, a tight end that we're paying a lot of money? Is it Amari Cooper, the always valuable veteran? I don't know, but somebody needs to be able to have a little bit of swagger and juice on that offensive side of the football, I think, to help things go a little more. I think if that happens, I think it takes a lot of, not a lot, but it takes pressure off Deshaun Watson thinking he has to be the guy. Yes, he still has to be the guy. He's the quarterback, but the night and day difference from the defense last year, besides the coordinator thing, is these guys are just loose. They're playing loose. They're fun. They're energetic, and they have that swag. I also need to see if Deshaun Watson can control his emotions, because last week, back-to-back personal foul calls, the face masks, the altercation of the sideline, it wasn't pretty. The Browns should win this game. I'm going to pick them to win this game. But Mitch, if they can't throw the ball against one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL, it may be time to start getting that panic button ready, because this to me is going to be very telling, because then you have Baltimore the next week. And right now, Baltimore looks like the best team in the AFC North through first 2 weeks. I also don't expect Kareem Hunt to have the workload I think others expect in the first 2 weeks. That week 5 bye, I think, is vital for Kareem Hunt. I know he knows the offense already. He barely got to play with Deshaun last year. Obviously, the 6 games Watson played. I am excited, though, because like Chubb, Kareem Hunt did not get primary running back carries last year as the RB1. Chubb did, but at the same time, not to the extent most RB1s do. So I think Kareem Hunt should be a little bit fresher. And this is a 1-year deal. He has something to prove because he wants to latch on with a team somewhere else. He had multiple offers. He took visits to New Orleans, took visits to Indianapolis and Minnesota. This, to me, is a perfect match because he knows most of the offense under Stefanski, and he has something to prove because he wants to get paid. He wants to show people he's changed since that off-the-field incident happened when he was in Kansas City. And so I think this is a match made in heaven, and I think this will take a load of pressure off both Jerome Ford and Deshaun Watson, because we know Kareem Hunt in the backfield, always a threat for check down and to catch passes and make plays with the ball in his hands. So I'm happy with the signing. The Browns should win this weekend.
I got a question for you. Do you think this is real? You think the burner account was real?
I wasn't going to bring it up. It is very interesting, given the time frame and the first tweets going out. I don't know. I hope it's not, but it's hard not to imagine it's hard not to think it could also be him given the timeline of everything happening.
Yeah, here's the thing. Number one, obviously, there are a number of athletes we've seen exposed in the past with burner accounts. Kevin Durant, the guy from the Philadelphia 76ers, the GM. But, like, there are so many replies, and so many of them are so broad that I cannot believe it would be a grown man replying to every single anti Deshaun Watson post about him right now. And there is frustration, I'm sure, from Watson because of the way he's playing right now, the way some people think about him. There is a thing too I've seen in some between some not media personalities in the Cleveland area, but like a lot of prominent people with a Twitter account can like post whatever they want about Watson, and Watson's been kind of seemingly blocking them lately. I've seen a couple of names in there as well. That's so stupid to me because it's almost like they're wearing a badge of honor. And I'm like, you're doing this for a guy that plays for your team. Now, granted, there are factors that play into that matter that could be different than your average Browns player who might just be playing poorly. But I don't know. This whole thing is just nonsense to me. And it's just one of the things that social media just brews up from time to time.
And I find it so interesting that so many people get hell-bent over the fact that he's blocking people on Twitter. You know, everybody has the social media they want to have. For Deshaun Watson, if he has negative things popping up in his timeline, Mitch, I think you and I both know he knows he is not back to form yet, right?
Right.
Whether that burner account is his or not. So if he's going to block things that he's seen that are negative about him, so what? Yeah, people could say, oh, he's a professional athlete, needs to deal with it, right? He hears worse things at a stadium from the opposing fans. Yeah, it's probably true. Oh, he has $230 million. He's rich. Yeah, it's fine. If he has to block people to get rid of some outside noise, that's fine too. Like, I don't have a problem with that. I'd rather see that than him go at reporters like we saw other former quarterbacks of ours do, like Baker at times, right? I'd rather see this because to me, it takes out a whole element of going back and forth, creating that rift between the media that covers the Browns, and then also having personal vendettas potentially and eventually against Browns players. How many players have we seen this with before, both in Cleveland and not in Cleveland throughout the NFL? If he's going to block people, let him block people. It does not bother me. And if he blocks me, I don't care. I really don't.
I was going to say, have you ever blocked people before?
Besides spam accounts that they tag you in those weird.
Okay, that's fair.
I don't think I've blocked any person for any reason. I really don't. I've muted things before because I just don't care about seeing people's tweets. But no, I don't think I've never blocked someone.
I made a rule a long time ago. I'm never going to block. Well, I'll get to the story in a second. But I never was going to block people for malicious reasons or people who are trying to go after me. Nobody goes after me. I have 300 followers.
I'm going to go after you now.
But yeah, I've muted certain things, especially after big losses where it's I don't want, and they still don't do a good job of leaking them through my timeline. But if the Browns lose embarrassingly, I could have done it last week, I would just mute words like Browns, Steelers, Watson, stuff like that. But I'll only set it for that. They give you an option where it's a day, 7 days, forever. I usually do it for a week. I blocked my mom once because I don't know why. There was just a thing where she was on social media when I was a teenager, and I saw her Twitter page one day. It's oh, she's on here now. It's one of the you remember that feeling where it's you went on Facebook when you were younger, and it's and you see your mom or your dad come across the account. It's oh, they're on there now, and you kind of don't want them to see it, even if you're doing nothing wrong. You're just oh, I don't want to have them be seeing this. So yeah, I blocked her for a while, and then I realized that's the woman who birthed and raised me. So I'm I can't block this woman. And it is now time for another segment of Fuel, Move, Recover, featuring Dr. Michele Ionno, physical therapist and president of Advancing Athletics. Michele, thank you so much for taking the time once again this week.
No problem, Mitch.
I mean, we're going to get into a topic here that we had planned initially, but it is in the last couple of days become more relevant than ever. Lower body injuries in the wake of certain things we saw on Monday night with Nick Chubb with the Cleveland Browns sustaining a season-ending and potentially more injury. There's a big emphasis, especially on parts of the body, to where they seem the most distant from what's going on up here. So with that, I kind of wanted to take us through the importance of, certain types of lower body injuries, what types there are, and, what the recovery times may be. But I kind of want to get your general thoughts first on, how to treat lower body injuries, how affecting they can be, and, what the process may be for someone who sustains one of these.
Yeah, it's funny, Mitch, because, like interesting, funny, not funny, of course. We had planned this topic, last week or whenever it was. And then, Nick gets hurt on Monday. And, as we roll into discussing this and kind of breaking it down, just, the first thing, of course, I say, as always, is that this is not medical advice and that you should consult your school's athletic trainer, a physical therapist that or someone like me, or, a medical doctor if you are dealing with any of these things, or you have an athlete that's dealing with any of these things. What's so tricky about all this is, not only does your heart go out for like Nick Chubb, because he's like, the heart and soul of what we, like to champion here in Northeast Ohio. It's like super cliche, but like really genuine too. And the thing that makes it so tough is just remembering that these, guys like Nick Chubb are professional athletes, and they're grown men, and women, of course, who have these experiences on the job. And typically, if we can kind of like get things put back together, then they will just go back to working the way they did before. How old's Nick? Do you remember? I think he's like,
I believe he's around 27, if I'm not mistaken.
27. So he's reached skeletal maturity. The harder one was when he got hurt in 2015. Some people may not know, he had a devastating knee injury in college that he was able to recover from. That one was actually more applicable to what we're discussing now because he wasn't skeletally mature then. So that's the big thing that we have to like kind of separate this stuff out with, is like adults versus kiddos. The hard part is that, the athletes that we're mostly talking about haven't fully developed yet. And if we do not get this injury to recover fully, there could be long-term quote unquote disability, limitations, pain, weakness, stiffness, stuff like that, and or deformities, which, because of they're still literally growing, which we'll talk about later on in the segment. I think that the other thing that's really important is why we take a different approach is the access to resources. We just talked last week about, what was it, like 20% of high schools don't even have an athletic trainer, for goodness sakes, let alone, pro athletes that, of course they have a whole team, but they have access to that team every day. So like just a couple examples to like give some context here. First of all, when I worked, I did an internship when I was still in school at Exos, which is formerly known as Athletes Performance. It's one of the primary places where football players train for the combine. And the football players that were injured and coming in to our facility, they were literally getting PT every single day. Me, I will get to see a kid maybe once or twice a week. And part of the reason why, and I don't take insurance in part because I can give a more personalized approach for sport injuries. But if you're going through your insurance, you only have 10 visits for the whole year, the costs can really, really be prohibitive. And so that's one reason why we are more conservative. We just can't get these kids the care that maybe they could benefit from. And then, the reason why we also want to take more care is that these injuries can linger. I rolled my ankle during a JV basketball game my sophomore year of high school, and I didn't rehab it fully. And I ended up having to have it ended up becoming chronically unstable. I'd sprain it all the time and actually had to have my ankle reconstructed after my freshman year of football in college. And I missed 2 years because I was rehabbing from that. And then I hurt my back. And so I missed half of my career just because of, the trickle down effect of, these things kind of piling up. The last thing is that pro athletes are mutants. They're not regular people like the rest of us. Even though they do get hurt and stuff like that, they heal so much better. They respond to physical training, mental training so much more robustly than we do. Some of our listeners may remember Brian Urlacher. He is in the Hall of Fame now as a linebacker. He spent his entire career with the Chicago Bears. He was recruited as a safety and a kick returner to New Mexico State. He was scrawny, 6'4", or he was like 6'2". He grew 2 more inches in college, and he put on like 60 pounds of muscle from the time he got into college to the time he ended. And he didn't lose any of his speed. That's not normal. Most of the time it's a trade-off for us normal humans. You get to be thin and fast or big and strong. You don't get both. But these people that are like the top percent of the top percent, like their bodies are just going to be more responsive. And so they're not going to be as impacted by some injuries like what the kids that we watch on Fridays and Saturdays are.
I see. So let's go through some of the lower half injuries that could take an effect on some people. One of the things we listed here, we kind of would go from least catastrophic to potentially major catastrophe. So starting off with sprains and strains in the lower half.
So, okay. So a couple things just for those of you who don't know. The first thing is common areas are feet, ankles, knees, and we grade the severity of the injury from 1 to 3. A 1 is like, you roll your ankle and, it's kind of sore, but you can still like pretty much play on it. Just maybe tape it up and you do some rehab with your trainer or PT while you're going through. A 2 is, maybe something, think like an MCL sprain. My knee hurts. It feels somewhat unstable. I need a few weeks off for the pain to go down, the swelling to go down, and then I can go back. And then number 3 is a rupture, a complete tear. So just be mindful that you're going to hear like a tear, like, oh, he tore his hamstring. Tear is the word that we also use as sprain. Rupture is the word that some people, when some people hear tear, they think rupture, but that's not how we use it. So that's important to differentiate. Typically ligament sprains, sprains and strains, ligaments, non-contractile things, ACLs, MCLs, ankle ligaments, things like that. Those are non-contractile things that just kind of like support joints. And typically those heal well. You may or may not need some rehab for it. And then you can kind of just go about your merry way. Whereas muscle strains are when you're actually tearing the actual like soft jiggly things in the muscle. Those have that same scale, but those can linger because you have to use that muscle. That muscle's strength is part of what makes it work and part of what also made it tear. And then the other hard thing too is that they often can linger because they are typically a sign of something bigger going on. A muscle imbalance, the front is stronger or weaker than the back. Maybe a movement pattern, glutes not working as well as hamstrings or calves or whatnot. Like a good example, Mitch, with Joe Burrow. So, he, the Cincinnati Bengals quarterback, for anybody that doesn't know, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably know who Joe Burrow is. Anyways, he had he started wearing a sleeve on his lower leg and during training camp. Then he got carted off because he pulled it really bad, missed all of training camp, came back for the Browns game, came back for the Ravens game a few days ago, and admitted in the post-game interview, which I found surprisingly transparent, Mitch, that he admitted that he's feeling the tweaks. He can feel it like being aggravated. And so that's a really good example of, even though he is, an incredible athlete, professional, there's something bigger that's going on, and he's probably going to be dealing with this for at least the rest of the year.
Yeah, I remember seeing that interview and going, whoa. So there's that. Another one here too is hamstring pulls. And I've actually had this experience before. There was one of these back in, what was it, middle school? It's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling. Man. And we just saw it with another player we can reference, Aaron Rodgers. That was a big thing that was a calf, I believe.
Yeah, calf is Achilles.
Yes.
Well, but that's all. But that actually fits into the same thing, right? So, I mean, the same like spectrum. So that hamstring injury, who is it? Cooper Kupp. He's on the IR. He's the Los Angeles Rams star wide receiver. He's actually going to get a second opinion because the darn thing just doesn't want to heal. Again, if these are things that professional mutants, as I called them earlier, deal with, then obviously the kiddos that we watch on Fridays and Saturdays are going to deal with this. So you think about like a hamstring strain, or like Amari Cooper, the Browns wide receiver, who has a groin strain. So he was questionable for the game and ended up traveling to Pittsburgh, and it was okay. He was able to play. So that's a mild strain that he was able to work through. Cooper Kupp's hamstring strain is more severe and is limiting him, even though it wasn't a rupture. And then obviously Aaron Rodgers' Achilles tendon, which connects your calf muscle to your foot, it was a complete tear of the thing that connects the muscle to the foot, to the bone. And, now, of course, he's out for the year, and maybe his career is finished as well. So but getting back to hamstrings and calves, they actually fit into a somewhat similar bucket. The hard part is that these muscles, they really get challenged when you're working at nearly 100%, sprinting full effort, jumping full effort, making really explosive, fast cuts. And it's not until you challenge that muscle, you use that muscle at that near 100% ability, whatever your ability is, are you actually working it in a way that gets it to fully rehabilitate. And then the tricky part is that if the muscle is weak, you have an imbalance with the other muscles around it, then you're more likely to even aggravate it as you're rehabbing it, which is what happened to Cooper Kupp. And that's what makes it really hard. And I even deal with this too as a PT, and I rehab these injuries all the time. It is really tricky, Mitch, knowing when to introduce that high effort, really challenging movement or speed into a rehab. And the other thing too, you know how it is when you're running like max effort sprints, that stuff is not fun, man. So it is so exhausting that it can be hard on the athlete to do enough of it to actually rehab it. So unfortunately, this doesn't help anybody or anybody who has an athlete that's dealing with this right now. But these are, as I keep saying, big picture injuries, things that require evaluation, and that you may have just been unlucky enough to miss out on whatever sport you're playing. And it just takes time for you to rehab it. And then later think about why it is that this is happening, either in your training at the school or with private organizations like what athletes do with me.
So we go over from hamstrings over to something that I think we can go from here to well up here a little bit. And these are very tough ones. Fractures. I mean, there's different types of them. There are different ways you can get them. And obviously you mentioned here two considerations that you might have to take into account when you might have this sort of sustainment.
Yeah. I think that in one way, fractures are similar to like ligament sprains, in that it kind of, you get a break, it's bad luck, whatever, you either get hit or fall or whatever, and you get a crack in the bone. We need you to get off of it, rest it, for a little while, the bone heals, and then, you're off on your merry way. So in some ways, they're very similar to, how we rehab, sprains, other than, again, the severity of the break, where the break is, like that kind of thing. So typical fractures or buckle fractures means the bone was hit or loaded in a way it's not meant to be. So you get hit in the leg, going like, left to right, center to outward. And so that puts a force on the bone that it's not meant to have. And so it causes a crack into the bone itself. That's a fracture. The two, and we'll talk about the another big kind, stress fractures, here in a sec. The main considerations are, first of all, if you have to be casted or if you're non-weight bearing or whatever for some amount of time, well, there's going to be weakening of the muscles that are around that bone that pull on that bone. And then those muscles have to kind of be built back up either before you can return or at the very beginning of the return. And so like you think about I know we're talking about lower body injuries right now, but Shane Bieber and Tristan McKenzie for the Cleveland Guardians pitchers. So they both hurt their elbows. Well, have been out for so long, not because it took that long for the thing to heal, but because the thing had to heal, and then they had to ramp up their throwing from playing catch to then throwing hard to then being in a simulated game and then go play in the minor leagues. And then now Bieber is set to start on Friday, finally, after all that time. I think he made one start after the All-Star break, so it's been like 2 months.
Yeah.
And again, he's a mutant, or almost 3 months. Same thing with our kids in that, whenever they give you a timeline, for like, oh, he'll be back in like 4 to 6 weeks. Well, the reason why it's a range is because we need the thing to heal enough first that we don't have to worry about it just breaking again or breaking worse. And then we have to recondition that body part for the demands of the sport itself. The other consideration is, so just to summarize, depending on severity of the break, you may have a longer recovery because you need to get back in shape now. Even though I just got done saying that once the bone heals, it's healed. But the other thing is that we're talking about the kids that play on Fridays and Saturdays are skeletally immature individuals. That means their growth plates are not closed. And that means that if the break occurs where your growth plate is, so your tibia, your big lower leg bone, your femur, and then you have the other main areas, your humerus. If you have a crack near that or at that area, well, now all of a sudden we worry about the bone not growing straight. The plate can close early and you can have one limb longer than the other. So there are real life, long-term issues and disabilities that can come about if these are not taken care of. And so that's another reason why we are so cautious with certain kind of injuries. The other part, just to touch on quickly, is stress fractures. And these can happen in the lower back. You're kind of like arching your back and then you get hit, or, you're trying to hit a volleyball or something like that. And then you can actually get a crack in those bones there. So tennis, soccer, football, those are common areas. Offensive linemen are at risk for getting these because you kind of get your back extended and your back extends so hard that it actually cracks a bone. So constant low back pain is a potential risk factor, something that we want to be on the lookout to get that evaluated. And then, of course, in the lower leg, think shin splints. That can often happen with runners. Shin splints is an overuse of the lower leg muscles. And then obviously, if it's not changed, running mechanics aren't changed, or your ramp up isn't kind of spread out more gradually, then that can turn into a stress fracture in the lower leg itself. The one other thing, of course, Mitch, that we're not talking about is when we have ruptures or really complicated fractures. I mean, these things are going to have to require surgery, and the length of time is simply going to be on the scale of months, not weeks. And so, it's almost like those things are, kind of grouped together that we don't really need to discuss, that we can kind of just discuss together like that.
Well, the last thing we need to discuss is the type of knee injury that can really be very serious, especially among young athletes. You kind of touched on it earlier. When your body's not fully developed, that can lead to certain problems when it comes to these sorts of injuries. And I mean, how do you think that type of recovery is different from, let's say, we go back to Nick Chubb, how he's kind of in the prime of his NFL career right now. He is obviously sustained this injury, but let's say, a 15, 16-year-old who still may not be fully physically developed might have a similar sort of injury. How catastrophic can that be?
Yeah, I mean, it can be really bad. The good part is that, your body is like, you haven't had a lot of injuries yet. And so the opportunity to heal is better. I think one thing I want to say right now, Mitch, is that, some people say, oh, it's just minor surgery. The only surgery that's minor is surgery not done on you. Okay. Anytime somebody like puts you asleep, or numbs a nerve and then starts cutting open things, there is a risk for infection, for things not working, for mistakes. And so it is very important that you take it seriously whenever you're considering having surgery, who's going to do the surgery and whatnot. For example, with ACLs, there are different places we can take. So the way we fix an ACL is we take something, a piece of like tendon or ligament from another part of your body, and then we kind of sew it to where the ACL used to be. Well, a lot of people come back in about a year ish, depending on, how bad it was and whatever, how old they are. But it really takes actually up to 24 months, 2 years for that to fully heal. So think like Odell Beckham. He comes back for the Browns. He gets cut or waived from the Browns, signs on with the Rams, plays in the Super Bowl, catches a touchdown, and then tears his ACL again. And even though the muscles are strong, that ACL cannot withstand the full load yet. And if you hit it just right, then you're at risk for tearing it again. So where we take it from in your body, how strong you are before it gets hurt. You think about like Nick Chubb being able to squat 600 pounds. That's a positive for him. He's also a pro athlete, so he probably heals better. That's a positive for him. But this is his second very catastrophic major injury. That's a negative for him. So the biggest, I think, take home message is that everybody's timetable is different. And remember that these are pro athletes. We hear about a lot of the success stories, but we oftentimes don't hear about the failures. Think LaCharles Bentley, Cleveland kid, went to Ohio State, went to Iggy, is an all-pro with the Saints, signs his second contract with the Browns. He's coming home the very first day of training camp. It was like 2007, I think. He blows out his ACL, has it repaired at the Cleveland Clinic. His knee gets infected. It gets a staph infection, and his career is finished. So even for pro athletes like that, they come back and just, they're not the same again, So, it's important that everybody remembers that your timetable is dependent on you and your body in and of itself and how well the surgery goes and whatnot. And importantly, time is a terrible measurement for recovery, meaning everybody, just because you are 4 months out doesn't mean, just because Mitch is 4 months out of ACL rehab doesn't mean Michele should be where Mitch was when he's 4 months out from his ACL rehab. And really that's any rehab, but just, ACLs are just such major things, and you can't rush it. You will get better. You have to be patient, and you have to follow certain guidelines, which, if anybody is interested in that or is going through this experience, I'm more than happy to help give more specifics that are applicable to individuals.
Well, Doc, where can people who may be seeking out your services be able to find you as well as Advancing Athletics?
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. So any of these topics that we've discussed today or in past weeks, you can reach me directly, recover@advancingathletics.com. Find me on X and Instagram at Michele Ionno, MICHELEIONNO. And then Advancing Athletics has pages on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Michele Ionno. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Mitch.
Vive Auto Sales, located on West High Avenue in New Philadelphia and Cleveland Avenue in Canton, is a used car dealership committed to getting financing for everyone. We give every customer that walks in our showrooms a prime buying experience, no matter their credit score or financial situation. Current inventory can be viewed at www.wefinancenow.com. Check out our Facebook pages for the most up-to-date information about upcoming events and promotions happening at Vive Auto Sales.
Are you trying to increase your speed, quickness, vertical leap, and agility? If so, NST Sports Performance is for you. NST trains athletes ages 5 through pro. NST designs each program specific to the athlete's needs, goals, and sports. For more, visit nstsports.com. Locations in North Canton and New Philadelphia. It's nstsports.com.
If you're looking for a new or pre-owned car or truck, why not see the Parkway Auto Group? Parkway is a special group of automotive experts with 8 brands to satisfy your needs. Come see the difference at the Parkway Auto Group on Commercial Parkway in Dover. 8 brands and 1 family. It's Parkway Auto Group.
The Furby Electric Supply Company has bright ideas for your home. Save money by converting to energy-efficient electrical products or add ambiance with beautiful lighting features. It begins with a professional consultation and a visit to the Furby Lighting Showroom. Then certified Furby contractors complete your project right and on time. Since 1934, 4 generations have built a reputation of quality and trust, and they offer emergency services too. Just visit Furby.com. That's F-U-R-B-A-Y. The Furby Electric Supply Company.
It takes a lot of practice to have a winning team. Albin Title has over 100 years of combined experience handling real estate, title, and escrow transactions. They serve Tuscarawas, Stark, Carroll, Harrison counties, and more. So choose Albin Title for your next home refinance, sale, or purchase. They'll get it done quickly and professionally. Contact Albin Title at 330-334-5800 or visit their website albintitle.com. Let them put their experience to work for you.
We all have 206 things in common. Our bones keep us up and moving. And we at Cleveland Clinic Union Hospital care about every single one of them. From the tip of your finger to a brand new hip, our orthopedic experts will keep you going while keeping you safe. For every break and breakthrough, for every bone and joint, for every care in the world. Get the care you need when and where you need it. Visit unionhospital.org.
Fall is in the air and part-time career enhancement courses at Buckeye Career Center are on the horizon. Registration is now open for Introduction to Beekeeping, Basic Small Engine Repair, and Sign Language. These part-time offerings run on Tuesday evenings and begin in November. Let Buckeye Career Center help you learn a new skill or advance your current skill set. Call 330-339-2288 for more information or to reserve your seat in one of these or our other part-time classes.
Have you checked in on someone yet today? This is your reminder. A simple text, call, or message. You don't have to be a professional to check in. You just have to ask and listen. Are you someone who could use a check-in? Dial 988 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A message from Stark County Mental Health and Addiction Recovery. It's heartbreaking for me. Heartbreaking for the city of Cleveland potentially, even though I'm sure that where can I get it here? None of them really care. Just another casualty, man. Just another unfortunate casualty is Travis Kelce in what is being considered the fun girl era for one Taylor Swift. This is the whole thing that, what was it, a few months ago where Travis Kelce was at the concert. He came on stage, I believe, and tried to sneak over his number. And then we heard the rumors, oh, they're hanging out right now. What's going on here? We heard, what was it, Iron Eagle make the reference when he caught a touchdown the other week, Kelce did. And this is via the messenger. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are nothing serious. She's in her fun girl era and strictly having fun right now. They've hung out twice and are texting oof. Only because he's a Cleveland boy. And it's like, oh boy, like, I don't know. I mean, look, maybe this is not true. Maybe it's like they are going to do something, but oh boy, to be part of the fun girl era. Ugh. Man.
Right hand up. Taylor Swift has some bangers. If this leads to a real good song about Travis Kelce, eventually if they break up, if they get together, whatever it is, and it involves football, sign me up. Like, I'm not ashamed to say that Taylor Swift has some bangers. Now, it's not like I go out and out of my way to listen to Swift, but like, hey, game recognized game, best tight end in the NFL. It's gonna most popular singer right now.
It's gonna be called like Arrowhead or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I'm the kind of the same way where it's like, oh, Taylor Swift, like this Eras tour that got sold out, record numbers, like people couldn't even get tickets, and they're making this concert movie about it, which was so like pre-sales were so huge that they had to move the Exorcist movie from October 13th to the 6th, because that's the same day as the Taylor Swift thing, and they don't want to get buried by that movie. Granted, that's because the Exorcist movie may not be as good, but this Eras tour, I'm like, what is this concert that everybody's raving about? Maybe I need to go see it because I love going to the movies. But either way, this is just like, Travis, man, you're still doing good as a receiver in the NFL. You're still on commercials. You're doing your thing. You got your podcasts. Meanwhile, his brother just had the documentary about him and his family come out. So there's that. So, good for them. What else do we want to talk about before we get out of here? College football, obviously. We know Ohio State's going to play Notre Dame. That's a big one this week. But number of big games you mentioned at the end of last podcast, and I didn't take a look at which ones we were going to look at for sure, but there are a number of top 25 matchups from what I remember. A couple ones being the big one that we mentioned the end of last week, Oregon taking on Colorado, the first test for Coach Prime against a top 10 team. Granted, I still think that USC is the bigger matchup, but the Ducks come in as 3-touchdown favorites at home. So it's going to be curious to see how they're going to be able to respond in that way. We got some of the matchups here. You mentioned we have Florida State as well taking on Clemson. Florida State's still a top 5 team despite sneaking by Boston College last week. Now, Clemson's kind of fallen off this year, but Dabo could do something interesting, and it's going to be in Death Valley, which is not an easy place to play. That game's at noon. The Colorado-Oregon game's at 3:30. The same time, number 22 UCLA takes on number 11 Utah at 3:30. Same time, number 13 Alabama trying to regain some ground against number 15 Ole Miss, a game which I could see Ole Miss taking for all things considered. We don't know. Washington State plays Oregon State pretty late on the West Coast. And then we have number 6 Ohio State against number 9 Notre Dame at 7:30. And then number 24 Iowa, who discovered how to play offense last week, against number 7 Penn State. So again, 7 matchups there. It could be very, very interesting over potentially 10, 11 hours of college football.
And listen, I have a free Saturday, so I'm so excited. I'm going to break out the extra TV, place it in the living room, put the other Roku I have on there, watch multiple games all day. But don't let it pull you away from the fact that there's probably going to be games out there that go under the radar now, because, Mitch, when's the last time in week, 4? Is this week 4 or 5?
This is week 4. Yep.
Week 4. That 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 top 25 ranked matchups, and then another one of Florida State and Clemson. So 7 big time games. And outside of the noon hour, you're going to have 2 to 3 games going to every part of the day, starting at 3:30. This is going to be a very fun early college football weekend. And this is a fact. This is going to alter the college football playoff standings. I think some teams that we don't think are for real are either going to prove it this weekend or be proven correct by media that they aren't for real. When's the last time we had a conversation about Alabama not having a quarterback? They don't even know who their quarterback is. They played a transfer last week after they had another person start the first few weeks. It's a mess down there. Nick Saban is feeling the pressure. He's more snappy at reporters than we've ever seen before. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin, Lane Kiffin wants to beat Nick Saban. Oregon State, Washington State, obviously them being on the West Coast, don't know much about them, but I'm always a fan of college football. The Ohio State Notre Dame game, though, Mitch, that's one that matters. That's one that we care about. I'm really intrigued to see what happens here, because I don't have a feeling one way or the other. I obviously am going to tell you I think Ohio State's going to win, but at the same time, they've been so up and down. They've started a trend on the right path now for 2 weeks in a row, but Notre Dame's also looked good. And yes, we've had a road game at Indiana. That's not a hostile crowd. We saw the blimp cam when they were there. The stadium wasn't even full. South Bend is going to be rocking tomorrow. It is going to be a frenzy. Can Kyle McCord, in what is going to be his first true road game in this type of atmosphere, answer the call? And can the Ohio State defense stay up to the standard they've had so far this year, where, even that close win, I say close because they didn't cover the 30+ point spread. The defense, though, has looked stellar so far. And can they handle Notre Dame? Notre Dame has a running back, Mitch, that I don't even think is getting enough attention right now, because I think he leads the country in rushing yards. And the conversation's not even on that. It's on Ohio State. This, to me, all the pressure's on Ohio State here. I think the media is covering Ohio State. We saw them win last year against Notre Dame. And for Notre Dame, this is a monumental game for their program. We saw them lose last year. We saw the Irish kind of fall off them last year, just not had a good season. So far this year, though, through the first few weeks of the season, Mitch, they've really answered the call. They've gotten better. They've won some football games convincingly. And they've had this date circled, I think, since last year when they took a trip to Columbus and played in the Horseshoe. And I have to assume Notre Dame's going to come out and try to punch Ohio State in the mouth. And for Ohio State in the previous year, when they play a big time game and they get punched in the mouth, specifically that last regular season game, they have not really been able to answer the call. Can they answer and fight back and punch back? I don't know. I'm excited. Ohio State's going to win, but at the same time, I don't say that with much confidence because there's so much uncertainty.
They're only a 3-point favorite going into the game. And you mentioned that running back, Audric Estime, who is second in the FBS in rushing yards per game at over 130. He scored 5 touchdowns, caught 5 passes for 55 yards as well. And then Kyle McCord, he's gotten better over the last 2 games, but he's going up against one of the top pass efficiency defenses in the country. They're second in completion percentage for opposing quarterbacks, around 44.3%, 5.2 yards per attempt. That's 13th in the country. They're going to have to put a lot of pressure on him to take a big chunk out of Ohio State's offense. But the Buckeyes have not lost to the Irish since 1936. I mean, it's not a rivalry that's been very frequent over the years, mainly in bowl games, but this play in and play out a series has been very fun to watch from last year and into this year. Some of those other matchups that I was looking at, one of them was Michigan going up against an undefeated Rutgers team, the number 2 team in the country. We'll also get Jim Harbaugh back on the sidelines as the head coach this week. OU's a 14-point favorite over Cincinnati, but I could see that could be an interesting game. Oklahoma and Cincinnati. Let's see here. We have a number of other matchups. LSU taking on Arkansas. We have, a lot of these are kind of, they should get back to business. Texas plays Baylor. I believe Baylor, what was it? No, they lost to Utah 2 weeks ago. But yeah, other than that, I'm curious to see where the Washingtons go up. Washington and Washington State this year, because Washington plays Cal this week. They're probably going to win. Washington's 8, Washington State's 21. So that could be a matchup that could sneak into sneak a Pac-12 team into the play. Again, this is a very open year right now. There's no team that I think is like so expected to just make the playoff almost automatically. Anything could happen at this point. There's about 10 teams right now that I think could make a case if they win out the season. Now, obviously, not every one of them is going to win this week, probably, but there's such a discussion right now for a number of teams that could either be one of the expected teams in the playoff this year, or it could be a wild card. You could see a team like Washington in there. You could see a team like Oregon. I mean, Oregon's the usual one in there, but you could see a team, if they're able to build themselves back up, see a team like Texas in there for the first time in a while, Washington for the first time, Penn State for the first time, Colorado, if you want to make that jump, if they are able to pass these upcoming next 2 tests. I don't know. It's going to be interesting.
I agree. And I think that outside of Ohio State, I'm obviously interested to see what Colorado does this weekend. I think that 21-point spread is a lot. I think that has a factor in that Travis Hunter is not going to play for Colorado.
Yeah.
I think the books also think Colorado might be looking ahead a little bit because next week they host USC.
Could be.
And that's another game I'm kind of curious about too, because USC is on the road at Arizona State. They're 34.5-point favorites. USC is a very, very good football team.
Yes.
They have realistically the best quarterback right now in college football, in Caleb Williams. But that, to me, Mitch, could be a game where I'm not saying they're going to lose, but I think that game could be closer just because I think they're looking ahead to Colorado next week. We're going to have good games next week too, which is exciting. I think Ole Miss is a team, though, that a lot of people didn't think could be a college football playoff contender. I think a win this week at Alabama to go 4-0, Mitch, I think that will move them up significantly.
Yeah, I was watching a thing on Barstool the other day. Like, Lane Kiffin needs a career-defining victory, and this could be the case against a team that he used to work for. That could help Ole Miss become a serious contender within the top 15, and then potentially work its way through the SEC. Now, obviously, they have to go through Georgia, I believe, to get to the SEC, get the SEC title, but anything can happen. What was it? USC and Arizona State. They have one of the largest over-unders, by the way, 62. I think they're the only team beyond 60 this week in the over-under, which is actually no, I was a lie. The Colorado Oregon game is 70. These Pac-12 schools just airing it out, man. They score all these points, and there's only 2 teams remaining in the conference, technically, for at least for the next year. Did you see the one clip, by the way, of Oregon State and Washington State? There was like a meeting on Zoom, and they usually have like backgrounds where it's like the Pac-12 logo, but all it was the 2 schools logo over and over and over, because like no other team is actively in the Pac-12 after this year. It was honestly kind of funny. Have you checked in on someone yet today? This is your reminder. A simple text, call, or message. You don't have to be a professional to check in. You just have to ask and listen. Are you someone who could use a check-in? Dial 988 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A message from Stark County Mental Health and Addiction Recovery.
Wendy's without the Wendy's app is like Nugs without the sauce. Or a Frosty without...
In contiguous U.S., Alaska, and Canada.
You deserve the best. And at Ferris Chevrolet, Buick, Cadillac, Toyota, that's what you get. We consider you, the customer, to be part of our family. Anybody can make promises, but when you visit Ferris, you get the Ferris deal from a Ferris wheel. So if you're looking for a car, truck, or van, think Ferris.
Think Ferris. Where you matter.
You matter. Everyone plays a part. We all have a role. Each of us can make a difference. You do matter, and the best way to have a positive impact is to pay it forward. With each of us helping one another to cope, feel better, and know that we belong. Pass on the positivity today. Tell someone else they matter too. Alt Care.
Alt Care, Alt Care. Where you matter.
You invest a lot in your home and vehicle purchases. Van Nostrand Young and Associates want you to feel secure should anything happen to those investments. We partnered with providers like Grange Insurance and other industry leaders to be sure you're presented with the most complete coverage to fit your needs. Because we're not only here to protect the items you invest in, we're here to protect your future as well.
Call Van Nostrand Young Insurance in North Canton at 330-497-1867.
Happy Sardiversary with Sarda rider Anthony. We're celebrating 25 years with our valued riders.
And I absolutely enjoy riding the buses. I get to know a few of the drivers, very respectful, very professional. Just an all-around about good experience. It helps people get to where they're going, disabled, veterans, or people going to work.
Thanks to all our riders as we celebrate Sarda 25 at Sarda.
You need to remodel your bath? You need JR Bath Company. Trust in the quality of JR Bath. It's fast, it's safe, and it's affordable. Call today at 1-800-664-2284 or go to jrbath.com. And then finally, I mean, we know the season's probably over, but the Guardians won last night against Baltimore. I was there for that game. The Guardians were able to break a tie in the 8th inning to score 3 runs. They staved off the Minnesota Twins for now. If they and the Tigers would have lost last night, the Twins were off. The Twins would have automatically clinched the AL Central. Now they're back in it tonight. They're going to play the Angels. The Twins are. The Guardians are going to play the O's again. And I have it on good authority. I mean, it's been broken already. But Shane Bieber is going to be making his return tonight after nearly a 2-month layoff for injury. And it's good to see him back on the mound, trying to get him some work before the end of the season. So, I mean, they're not out of it. They're not out of it yet, technically, but it's going to take a lot to make a comeback run, and which would I think that would break the Minnesota Twins organization if that were to be the case. If that happened.
Yeah, honestly, if that did happen, that would be one of the crazier things we've ever seen. I mean, it would take the Guardians to win out and the Twins to lose out, with the elimination being down to one, the number. Um, the whole Bieber thing, Mitch, I I'm I look at it one way. I think they're bringing him back tonight to see where he's at, and if he has a good outing, I think that'll be the last start he has as a Cleveland Guardian. I do think that if he performs semi well against a very good Baltimore Orioles team that is going to make the playoffs, they're a game and a half ahead of Tampa Bay right now in the American League East. I do think that Shane Bieber will be traded in the offseason. I think they're just hoping he can go out 4 innings, maybe 5, of a good performance against a good baseball team. It is what it is. I think that is also why we haven't seen Tristan McKenzie back yet. I think they're going to be a little more cautious with him being under control, him being younger. It is what it is. I honestly can tell you that I have not sat down and watched more than an inning or two of any Cleveland Guardians game since that series against the Minnesota Twins, which they were beaten 2 out of 3 times and really kind of put the nail in the coffin. I will probably watch next week in their last home games, as I know the organization is doing a giveaway, the last home game of the season with Tito. Thank you, Tito shirts I saw, as a thank you to Terry Francona, even though he has not 100% came out and said he's retiring, although we do know he is going to retire after the season unless something happens. I mean, hey, maybe if they run the table here and the Twins completely fall off, maybe he comes back next year. Who knows? But yeah, no, I'm more so just excited for postseason baseball, even though our team will be in it. I love postseason baseball. I think there's a lot going on right now. The Rangers, one of the most reeling teams in baseball. All of a sudden, this was a team that had not been more than 2 games back through the halfway point in August all year in the American League West. Then they lost 6 in a row, I think 5 in a row. Now they're back. They're only a half game back of first behind Houston, tied with Seattle. The American League West is going to get 3 teams, and it looks like the American League East is going to get 2 or 3 teams in as well. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out.
Well, yeah, I was going to say here, if the playoffs ended today, it would be Tampa Bay comfortably in the first wild card seed. Toronto would be in there as well, and then it's between Texas and Seattle. The Yankees are 7.5 back; they're out pretty much. Boston's officially eliminated, which is very fascinating because Cleveland and Detroit technically have worse records, but they don't have an E next to their names because of the divisional race. So yeah, and then on the west side, Philadelphia, Arizona, Miami, and Chicago, which is very interesting as well. Arizona's kind of jumped up. They've won 5 in a row, and I don't think people are talking about them very much just because they're kind of an out there team. But who knows? Maybe they can make a run here in the next coming weeks. So there's that. Now, before we go, I want to bring up this because I saw it on TikTok, and we were talking about because of the Guardians, like a crazy run that they could have at the end of the season. I saw a TikTok the other day that was it was like a versus thing, and it was MLB The Show intros. I don't know if you played MLB The Show very much growing up. I was a 2K kid growing up on the PlayStation, and then I got into the show when I was able to go to the next gen consoles on PS4 and beyond. But they had this debate, which was the better intro for their games. And I'm going to pull it up here on the screen. The first one was MLB The Show 12, and this was the year after the crazy 162 run that the wild card had for the American League and the National League for Atlanta and St. Louis, and then Boston and Tampa Bay. Do you remember? Did you play this game, Mitch?
Oh, I did. I am a huge MLB The Show advocate.
God, I still remember like this was yesterday. It's unbelievable. Michael Bourne. Gosh, when the Astros were in the National League. I remember the O's kind of were in a game against Boston, and then they took the lead. Tampa Bay, meanwhile, was
against the Yankees, right?
Yankees. David Price looked like he blew it. Oh my goodness, this is taking me back. And then Atlanta got up on Philadelphia, and it looked like they were going to do something.
Yeah, Dan Uggla.
Carl Crawford, and he'll play a big part of it later. Oh, yep. And remember, this was like the pre-social media. I mean, social media was around back then, but it wasn't like it is today. So we kind of had to like follow this as it was happening in real time. It was crazy. God, remember when you could block the plate?
Yep. Baseball was better then.
Jay Sutley, Craig Kimbrell. That was right when Kimbrell was that was his rookie year. Chris Carpenter.
This is probably honestly, Mitch, one of the best nights in totality in the history of baseball.
It's up there for sure. I mean, it was one of the craziest because we've never had a situation like this in both leagues. We've had it in one of the leagues before.
Yeah.
And they were all happening in real time. I'll just skip it over a little bit so I can so I don't get copyrighted. Papelbon. God, and the O's weren't even playing for anything anymore. They still got the victory. And then that was Francona's last game with the Red Sox.
Yep.
Unbelievable. That game is what allowed us to take advantage of him as a manager. And then, of course, I really thought he was headed for the Hall of Fame. I really did.
Longoria?
Yeah.
Yeah. He was
insane. Like that. I mean, the Rays made the World Series 3 years ago, but that's the craziest I've ever seen Tropicana Field.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the intro for that game. And then you have this one, which this was my game, my first game on the show. This was. Ooh. That was the year right after Vin Scully stepped down as a Dodgers broadcaster. First of all, rest in peace, Vin Scully. And, yeah, he's this very long, kind of drawn out thing. And gosh.
I was a big fan of MLB 17, the show. I was one there and judge on it.
I believe so, yep.
And then Ken Griffey was like the Legends cover.
Yes, that's the one I had. The Legends cover, yes.
Too.
Robinson. Let's try to skip it over here. It's a lot of like the old school, like the other one focused on the season prior. This one kind of focuses in on the great moments in baseball history. Obviously, Lou Gehrig's speech. Actually, you know what? This might be. I don't know if this is a different one because I originally thought it focused in on the previous season. But let me see if there's anything else here. Derek Jeter's play.
Yep.
And this is the only thing I don't like about it.
Yep.
But it works. It really works well. Yep. No, those were two amazing intros. It's hard for me to choose. The 17 had more production value, obviously, and more modern production value, but 12 was energetic, and that was a really cool way to like show how awesome Major League Baseball was going into the last year, and then they have their game.
Yeah, 12 to me, I think was the better just because of how nostalgic can get. And like I said, it's one of the best days in the history of Major League Baseball. In totality, just with all the races going on at the same time in both leagues, live, both, teams have big leads. You think, oh, it's over. Tampa Bay's not getting in the playoffs, and then it just completely flips around. Teams crumble. That's what's fun. And that's what we're going to get to watch. And I just looked, the Texas Rangers play Seattle 7 more times now coming down the stretch. So those two teams are going to go against each other in terms of who is going to be probably that last wild card spot in the American League, unless Toronto completely falls out of it, which when you have a team playing each other 7 times, I don't think that Toronto team would fall out of it unless they go like 2-9 in their last 11 or something. So it's going to get fun. We're going to see who the top seeds are. I think the Braves are still the best team in the National League. The American League, I absolutely have no clue. I don't know if it's the youth with Baltimore. I don't know if it's Tampa just with, the players they have. Is it the experience with Houston? I don't know, but sign me up for October baseball, baby.
Absolutely. Same here. All right. Well, thank you guys for listening or watching the Big Time Sports Podcast Show. Be sure to check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also find us at bigtimesportsohio.com. We're trying to get back to on the local broadcast network app here as soon as we can. Pretty much at BTS Ohio on Twitter or X or whatever, at Big Time Sports Ohio on Facebook and Instagram, at Mitch Spinell, at Mitchell Balla, everywhere else. Mitch, what's the fact of the day?
No fact of the day again. It's another shout out to former high school teammate of mine, Kyle Nicholas, getting the call up to the show for the Pittsburgh Pirates. Very well deserved, hardworking kid, was a great teammate in high school at Jackson, playing with him. So very happy for him and hoping that he's not the only teammate of mine, hoping Dylan Dingler gets a call up here soon. And if he doesn't, hopefully he's on that opening day roster for Detroit next year. But
I was going to say he's on the Tigers AAA team, correct?
Correct. Yep.
And then, then Nichols came into the Pirates game the other night, had a bit of a struggle, but we just penned a post of that on BigTimeSportsOhio.com. So thank you guys for listening or watching the Big Time Sports Podcast Show.